Hi, I'm Wayne from TC Electronics and Marine. I'm the tech service rep there. That sterndrive.info, you can find them at. The purpose of this video is to, I guess, for me to be able to send people to this video who phone me asking me for what they need to rebuild an 800 series low profile upper gear case. We're going to start off. This is the bearing carrier. It's a used one. It just needs to be sandblasted or wire brushed or cleaned up before you start. That would be your upper gear case, low profile upper gear case with steering in this case. And that's your bearing retainer. Goes in front of the that would fit in there. So that holds the ball gear in. Moving from left to right, this would be a top lid, which would you may need or may not need. It would fit on top here, like so. The part number for it is 27860. In most cases, you should be able to reuse the steering. Remember that to put these shims back, they're 10 thou a piece. There's normally 3 or 4. That's the steering gear, and this would normally fit there. And these you should grease and drop them down there. Okay, it's very important that you don't forget those when you put it all back together. Water pump bolts, they would have a Loctite product and anti-seize, the copper you see there. It's Loctite anti-seize called C5-A. That's water pump shaft if required. A lot of times the spline here, you can see it that well, gets stripped, or sometimes it gets stripped on the inside, but most of the time it gets stripped right here on the outside. They're good for about 400-500 hours, and that's it. Usually that's one of the spots that wears out. The reorder part is 22410. A note, the key, when you do slide the key in, it's best to put a little bit of Loctite on it. This is the bearing carrier dry shaft. That's the centering cone. Most times you can reuse this. If it's scored, then you'll have to replace it, but most of the time you can reuse it. That's the seal kit, 87,650. That's the water pump kit, 12,190 is the number. Comes with a faceplate kit. This would be the ball gear shim at the front for the bearing retainer. Go on will go on that there area right there. Most of the time you should finish with about 8 to 10 thou in shims at the front if it's correctly assembled. This is the seal. The seal fits in here. That's the spring for it. Seal number is 86652. And that's the spring that goes inside of it. 11056. This is a mounting gasket. When you put it back on, you require that. Number 34810. And it comes with the O-rings that fit on here. So you might require those. This is the rear bearing shims. Shims for the rear bearing. Swivel unit. Water pump swivel base, I guess it's called. You just need to polish this up and make sure there's no scoring in here. Most of the time you reuse this. This is 23360 shim kit. This is for the pinion gear. It's for spacing. It would fit inside here, this area here. And you try and, usually it would be somewhere between 18 to 28. Most of the time 22 to 24 would be average for shims added. But it varies. It depends how old, whether the bearings have been pressed down inside here, whether there's scoring. You know, it changes depending on the bearing carrier or whether or not it's a new one. If it's a new GLM one, most of the time the spacing's 26 thou. That'll give you at least a starting point. This is a used gear set we're using. In this case it's 2118. But these parts are the same no matter what the gear ratio is. It's the same for all of them, as long as it's a low profile you're using. This is ball gear. A lot of the times, if you're using a used one, you'll see scoring in this area here, and the problem with that is you won't be able to pressure test it to seal it. That's why we always use a new one. 22020 is the ball gear number. When installing this, just when you get your seal kit and you open it up like this, just place the so that you don't, just place the seals over the area just to make sure it's the right one and that you don't mix them up. The other two go on here. Okay, if you just place them on there, that way you can't confuse them, because you can screw it up and put the wrong ones in. They will both fit into here. So the other thing to remember is that before you install these, put some oil on the inside before you slide this into it. On the outside of these, you would put 680 Loctite. So you'd put a bead on the outside all the way around on both of them, and you'd put some Loctite on the inside where that polish area is there in front of the bearing. And then you would insert this one down like this, and the last one would go up. So it would be in this order here. In the case of the 680 Loctite, if this was a loose fit, and say it was, it would just push down, like this one almost does. If it pushes down or almost falls through, it's still reusable. You would just put a coat of 680 Loctite on it, on each one, on the seal itself on the outside, and on the inside all the way around, and you just leave it 24 hours, and then you'd put one more coat on and you'd press them all in, and it will make up 10-15 thou gap. It's also, when installing the ball gear onto the shaft, after it's once you slide it into the seals, it's important that you put on the taper area right here that you use the 680 Loctite on this taper and on this taper, because that's your seal. The seal is not the silicone that you put over top of the nut, and on the bottom of this use this gel seal, and that would fit in here. But that's not the seal. That just stops the nut from rusting. And the nut, both nuts, the pinion nut plus the nut for the ball gear, do come with the gear case seal kit. One more question I get is the water pump kit comes with these 3 items, but I'm not sure if you can see it, but it says pump side. So when you're installing this, you would be putting this like so, put your key in here. You'd use a little bit of Loctite on the key and hold it in. You would then grease the shaft, grease the impeller, slide it down, make sure it lines up with the key. You would grease the inside, this area here, and then you would insert this in. You would just push it in, but you would turn it counterclockwise when you're installing it. Not clockwise, counterclockwise when you're pushing this piece, these pieces into the water pump housing. I will, after the pieces are assembled, I'll try and shoot a couple more shots or a small video of just showing you the completed pieces. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps you. This is the first seal that's installed. Normally you would just install it with a sealant. This is typical bearing or seal installer that you can get at any automotive store. So you put the first one down with Loctite on the outside. Again, there's coating of Loctite on this. Place that there. Okay, and then you just tap that down with the seal installer. This is the bearing retainer for the ball gear. You can use a muffler adapter or something or anything to go in there, and we put a coating of zinc chromac, and after that we just put a clear lacquer on. And that stops it 2 or 3 years from now from corroding. Seems to stand up quite good. Okay, this is the water pump assembly after I've installed it by turning it counterclockwise. Holding this, turning the shaft counterclockwise. Well, we have this here like that. There's 2 seals here. 2 O-rings, sorry. There's a large one and a small one. The large one is for the steering. So we'll put that over there with the steering parts. And the smaller one gets inserted into the water pump here. There's a groove on the inside. A little hard to do with one finger. I'm going to have to invest in something to hold the camera. I've actually never done this before, so it's a learning experience. Hopefully this will help people though. One more thing while we're at it. There's a clip here, and you need to slide the clip down, seat it out, and then one of these will be in the seal kit, and you just install that onto the spline, slide it down, and then you would put grease here, and then you would, I'm going to put a layer of gasket compound all the way around here. This is the layer of gasket compound. The way we place it, and also around the outside, and an O-ring that goes over top of it. And what that does is it allows the gasket compound to thicken up, get tacky, so it has a thick viscosity, and it's when we install it, it stops the fumes. It will stop the fumes from entering the water pump. Stop you from picking up air when it's... If you get a pulsating when you check the water flow from the water pump, it's usually because the gasket compound or a silicone was not applied in such a fashion, and the fumes from the exhaust gas end up getting in there, because the exhaust gas goes through here and the water pump assembly obviously goes right there, so it's important that the gasket compound be used. We also use a wheel bearing grease or lithium grease on the inside, the female and male end of the water pump shaft. Also there's, you can look inside, you'll see the impeller also has lithium grease on it. It makes it easier when installing the impeller into the pump. Once again, make sure that when you install it, you're turning the shaft counterclockwise and holding the base with your hand. Okay, when installing the ball gear assembly, prior to it, it's much easier if you retap the 4 holes here before you start, and if you can retap the 6 holes at the top as well before you start. This surface area here, we've sandblasted it. It's got like a 1 or 2 thou bead, glass bead from prepping it. So we would install, this is a Scotch-Brite material. This one's made by DeWalt. It's 150 grit. And I'm not sure which, this one's made by Keen. It's called Keen Bright, and it's sold on the internet, and it's 180. And you would just I'll just show you there. Within seconds, you polish out the gear case. It takes very little, less than a thou off the material, and it leaves it really polished. And that way, when you put the O-ring in with the gasket compound, it makes for a really good seal, so that you have no water leaks. Actually, in our case, it's so that it'll hold 15 pounds of air, so that it'll pressure test and you won't lose the air. But you know, if it'll hold 15 pounds of air, it'll definitely hold 2 pounds of water, or 2 pounds of oil. There's one more thing I forgot to mention. After you retap them all, polish the inside out. But if you a phone call I continually get is, if you were to strip one of these when you're putting it together, first off, the tap I'm using is a quarter 20 national course tap. So quarter 20. And if you were to strip one of these, what you would do is you would put a Healy coil in there. So for any of you that don't know what a Healy coil is, it would look like this. This is a special tap for the Healy coil. And this is a quarter 20 Healy coil. And it would just simply, you would just drill it out a little bit. It would be 17/64 is the drill size. You would drill this. You would tap it, and then you would take this tool here. Very hard to do it with one hand. And you would just simply screw this in once it's tapped with this tool. And it's very important that this be very clean. And on the outside of these threads, you have to put 680 or 609 Loctite to hold the Healy coil in place. And don't put a bolt in it for about 6 to 8 hours. And when you do put a bolt in it, make sure that you use some anti-seize, copper anti-seize, so that the Loctite doesn't snag the bolt you're using. And when you use one of these, it actually ends up stronger, because you end up with a stainless steel thread, and it actually is stronger than the original thread that was on there prior to. We don't sell this, but the name of the company is called Recoil, and it's thread repair. And the quarter 20 size is, that's it there, part number 33040. I'm sure you can purchase it online or at a bearing supply place. There's also a larger size. This is a larger size unit. This one here. Okay, and that would be for the 1/2 inch water pump bolts. If you were to strip the water pump bolt hole, you would put one of these helicoils in it, and that way you don't have to throw out your gear case. You would just simply put a helicoil in it, and they work fine. If you're looking for the bearings, the bearing set, you'd be looking to order 21547, which would be the small rear bearing. Goes at the back of the ball gear. This would be the bearing for the front of the ball gear shaft, 21544, and this would be to replace the pinion. This one here. We're going to change this one here. We're not going to use that. And that's the number there, 21545. So that's the set for the gears. Over here, for the dry shaft bearing, which we just installed, is 21546. If you need to reorder one of these. If you're changing the dry shaft, it's a good idea to change the bearing with it, and not to use the other one, as the bearing can usually get damaged just on the removal of it. When installing the ball gear, place some oil on the outside here, all the way around with your finger, and also on the inside of the seal. Just some gear oil all the way around, and then it makes installing it much easier. Hard to do with one hand though. I need to get something to hold the camera while I'm doing it. Once installed, should look something like that. You need to wipe off the excess oil, and on the taper area now, you would put a coating of Loctite 680 or 609 on that taper area there. That's where it's going to hold onto the shaft. Okay, once you've got the assembly together and the two taper areas you have Loctite on, the next thing you want to do is use a medium strength Loctite for the nut. And the nut comes with the seal kit. And I'm not sure what the torque is on it, but what the official torque is. I know that we're using a gun here, an impact gun, to put ours on, and ours is set at 90 pounds. And all I can say is that I put probably over 1,000 units on, and never had one come loose. I really believe it's the Loctite that's holding it. However, it's not the nut that's holding it on. It's the taper area with the Loctite that does all the holding. This is Gel Seal 2, it's called. It's an OMC product. But there's an equal product made by Loctite. It's flange sealant, 810 or 815, either one will do. In a pinch you can just use silicone, but it doesn't work quite as well. But basically what we're doing here is we just want to cover the nut and the area where the seal is going to go. So this is the seal area here. Doesn't have to be, you can wipe off the excess. Okay, you put the plug in. Just place it in all the way around and make sure you can turn it. And this is what we use. It's a bit of a concave, just something we made about 10 years ago. And it has a bit of a concave to the inside. You can use a socket upside down and it just fits there. This would be the end product with the little dimple. I don't know if you can see it there. And we spray it with a lacquer to, in case it goes into storage or we're not using it right away, so that stop the ball gear from rusting. And that would be it for this assembly. We'd next start to assemble this into the upper gear case. Just a word about the 23310 shim kit for the ball gear. We have a shim video that's online. And for some reason there's a green shim here. And it looks blue in the camera. So, at any rate, the brown one is 10 thou. The blue one is 5 thou, the green one is 3, and the tan colored one is 4, and the red one is 2. Okay, and that's the thickness of them, 2 thou, 2 to 10 thou. Alright, just to wrap things up, this is pretty much what the end product looks like. In case you're wondering, we use a swivel housing down here at the bottom. It can also go up and down like this too when you're working on it, and you can shift it whatever way you want. Makes it easier to work with. The one more thing I forgot to mention is there's a steering here, and there's a left-handed and a right-handed steering. So it's important that you get the correct steering when you're having it installed. For those of you who don't know, this is the steering quarter moon, and what happens is the threads can be tilted left or tilted right, and then the let's see if I have one here for this one. The worm gear here will turn it. So they're matched sets. The worm gear and the quarter moon here need to be matched sets. This particular one, for instance, is a 21-20 left-handed steering, and this one here is an electric shift. And the reason you can tell that is the electric shifts have a smaller hole here because it only has a small electric cable that it needs to let through. They look the same, the case is identical, but the hole difference is substantial compared to the it's much smaller. This one's about a 1/2 inch, and this one looks like it's about 7/8. Okay. So that's the completed product there. And you just have to make sure that if you're ordering one that you order the correct left or right worm gear for steering. Okay, these that you see here are all low profiles. Okay, they would have a 12-inch exhaust housing with them. High profiles would have a 15-inch exhaust profile. Thanks for watching.